All right, should we get started then?
Absolutely.
Okay, this is starting eating disorder treatment questions and answers. My name is Danielle Levitine. I'm the Vice President of Admissions and Clinical Services at Balance Eating Disorder Treatment Center. I'm happy to say that this year is my 10th year working specifically with eating disorders, and I've been a therapist a little longer than that. And I love answering the questions that might come up today and get people started on their journey to recovery. I know Melainie will say we strongly believe at Balance that recovery is possible, and we want to help relieve any anxiety that you might have about the process, and hope you feel a little more comfortable about it after today's webinar.
Terrific. Thanks, Dee. There's a little bit of a vibration on your audio.
Okay. Is that a little bit better?
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Melainie Rogers. I am the founder and CEO here at Balance Eating Disorder Treatment Center. I'm also a registered dietitian by training and a certified eating disorder registered dietitian and supervisor. And it's my great pleasure to join the wonderful Danielle tonight to go through some common questions that come up around treatment, and is treatment right for me, and what does treatment look like, and a lot of those kind of common questions that we hear a lot from potential clients. So hoping that tonight's Q&A will be helpful to you, and I'll be checking the chat box, so if you have any specific questions and you'd like to pop them in the chat box, we can go through those as we proceed through some of our points tonight. Over to you, Dee.
Yeah, so we do have some slides that we're going to go through, just kind of going over the basics of treatment and how to get started. And then we really want to be here to hear any questions tonight and have a discussion as we can. But some common questions that we hear is, doesn't everyone have an eating disorder these days? Do I really need treatment? Do I really need to change my relationship with my body or with food? We know that diet culture really does affect the large majority of the population, but there is something a little different when you're struggling with an eating disorder. The ways that the thoughts can get obsessive, the way it can disrupt your life, the way that you can really start thinking about food and body constantly, or having a hard time making decisions around what foods to have. We know there's something a little more going on than disordered eating. I talk to clients a lot about, you could be impacted by a diet culture, but, you're still going to nourish your body and not have obsessive thoughts about your body as the evening goes on. But when you're struggling with an eating disorder, we see a little bit of a difference there of how the thoughts get obsessive, and you kind of can get stuck in that cycle. We do know, and this is from the research that's reported, so we know that this is a hard topic to talk about. So the numbers that we have might not even capture all the clients who are struggling, because I do believe that there's a lot of clients out there that are still afraid to, talk to their loved ones or talk to providers about what's really going on. But there are 20 million women, 10 million men from the research that we have. This is from our National Eating Disorder website. Struggle with an eating disorder at some point in their lives. And we find that stigma against all mental illness, and eating disorder in particular, is really what obstructs and is a barrier to getting a timely diagnosis and adequate treatment.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a staggering number when we think about it. It's about, just under 10% of the American population, and these numbers here are based upon the US of A. And so we think globally, because this is a biological illness, that globally we're looking at about a lifetime prevalence of 10% of the population, irrespective of country of origin or if you're in a westernized nation or not. So that's pretty staggering, and it flies in the face of the research that we've had over the decades that initially tried to determine prevalence of eating disorders, and it was estimated to be around 1% or less, 2% maybe. And in fact, prevalence rates were considered to be so low that most healthcare professionals are therefore not trained in eating disorders, because again, you've got to prioritize what are the most common illnesses and eating disorders were ranked as very low prevalence. But we're now finding, surprise, surprise, not so much, that they're actually far more prevalent than we ever thought. And combine that also with a culture. Our current culture is very focused on the thin ideal. So many people are dieting, which can certainly exacerbate disordered eating behaviors. And if you have the genetic predisposition, can actually trigger the onset or switch on the onset of a full-blown eating disorder. And, you know, I don't know about you all, but I don't know anyone who's basically ever not dieted. I think it's a very common thing, unfortunately, in our current society. And it's also a common go-to treatment to go on a diet and lose weight for many medical illnesses that we're also realizing actually are making things worse for people with respect to their relationship with food. So it has great severity and great significance in the community. And as you said, Dee, you know, the stigma against mental illness, which is still prevalent, though we're working hard to try to reduce that. And I think we've seen, I'm sure people who are joining us today have seen a number of different advertisements and public health announcements around trying to, you know, where athletes are talking about their struggle with an eating disorder or their struggle with, you know, some of our top Olympic champions, right, are talking about their struggle with depression and such, which is really helpful, I think, in the idea that anyone can have a mental illness. And in fact, 25% of the population apparently has depression or anxiety. So you can see that these are, you know, people who struggle with mental illnesses and or eating disorders, people around you. You know, these are people you know, people you work with, people you go to school with, people in your families. They're very, very common.
We also know one of the common thoughts is when I change my body, this is going to happen, or I'm going to feel better. You know, if I get to focus on a certain number, and we do really want you to, you know, ask your questions you have about treatment and try to figure out what's holding you back, because that cycle just continues for so long, and that happiness that your mind convinces you might come typically doesn't come. We get to see in treatment that's really just masking some other struggles that need some support.
And it's often an illusion, right? Yeah. And it's often an illusion, Dee, isn't it? It's part of how the eating disorder kind of takes over the way that the brain thinks, or our brains think. And so you end up with some distorted thoughts or beliefs or hopes around, if I look a certain way, then I'll actually, you know, feel great. But in fact, you know, we see, as you said, Dee, that clients, even as they may lose weight or adjust their bodies at the initial onset, are usually far from satisfied. In fact, the dissatisfaction tends to get worse and worse. It can get worse and worse, and often does over time. Great. Okay, Jennifer says, hi to you all. So glad to be here. Thanks for joining us, Jennifer. Thanks for the comment. All right, Dee.
So another question that could come up, you know, is an eating disorder really serious? Is it really something that warrants treatment? Yes, is the answer. Eating disorders are really serious. Just some more statistics that we have for you to think about tonight, that if intervention, you know, doesn't happen early enough, that we do see the highest mortality rate in eating disorders and any other mental health diagnosis. So it can get really serious, and we hope it doesn't go to that level. We're going to go through levels of care tonight, and there are many levels under, you know, inpatient hospitalization. There's a range of ways to get treatment, but there are medical complications, whether you're struggling with binge eating, purging, restriction, which can lead to feelings of starvation, overexercise, self-harm, suicidal thoughts. That can all come with an eating disorder, and it's a really serious issue that's impacting your day-to-day living. I say the eating disorder affects all organs of the body, but especially the mind and the brain. It's an organ that shouldn't be discounted. So the emotional distress and the quality of life, the way that that's impacted, we know if you're experiencing that, that's enough on its own to experience treatment and warrants treatment.
Absolutely, and I think this is something that that I don't think anyone, most people, when they hear this statistic that eating disorders have the highest mortality of any psych illness. In fact, only recently, because the opioid crisis, has it actually slipped to number 2. But I think most people are shocked. They've never heard that. They had no idea that it was eating disorders were that severe. And again, this is part of how little real information is out there in the community around eating disorders. And we need to do a lot better, I think, in educating the general public and healthcare professionals around the severity of these illnesses. Because the problem is, guys, is that if you don't know that statistic and you yourself are struggling or a loved one is struggling, we can tend to minimize it. And we can also just tend to think, it was only a few pounds, or, he or she likes looking that way or weighing that amount, or whatever it may be, the case may be. And so there can be a lot of minimizing, not realizing how incredibly serious this is. And also, as Danielle was highlighting, it's not just the weight. That's an external factor, but we're even more concerned about what's happening internally to all the body organs, particularly the heart, through weight loss. And even, if you're starting, if, let's say you go on a diet, let's say you have struggled with your weight all of your life, and you've gained weight steadily over time, and maybe your doctor even says, I think you should lose X number of pounds, and you start to lose that weight and keep going. And it doesn't matter what your end weight is or your start weight. So you may be 300 pounds and losing 100 pounds, or you may be 150 pounds losing 30 pounds. It doesn't matter. The impact on the heart is significant, very significant, and it weakens the heart. So we have a lot of concerns around heart failure, which is a leading cause of death with eating disorders. And perhaps certainly as importantly, what's happening when you lose weight, even for a short period of time, and or you're eating inconsistently. Let's say your eating patterns are restrict, and then overeat. That is inconsistent eating. That means that your brain is therefore not getting adequately nourished. And we see that the brain and the body start to become malnourished. Again, even if the eating pattern is restriction with overeating, or restriction with overeating and purging, any of those combinations. So it's not just anorexia, which many people may know is probably the more common of the eating disorders, but all eating disorders have this feature of inconsistent nutrition, which affects the brain, which makes the illness able to take hold to a greater degree, which leads to distorted thinking, and also a minimization of, it's not really that serious, and I'm just being uber healthy, or I'm just avoiding carbs, or I'm just avoiding basically everything. And so it gets really, really tricky, because you lose the ability to be objective in viewing your own behaviors. And so hence people can get really sick and be very, very taken aback and surprised that, their organs are starting to fail and their electrolytes are now out of balance and such. Okay, so Danielle, we've got a couple of questions here. Wow, great comments, guys. I'm loving it. Is it okay if
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so what are the signs that you may have an eating disorder? I think we have a slide on that later on, Danielle, or should we cover that now?
We can cover that now.
Sure.
The three things that jump out to me are, like Melainie's been talking about with nutrition and what intake would be, the type of thoughts you're having, and physically how you're doing. So again, I'm going to start with the mind, because I'm really going to highlight that. So if you are having obsessive thoughts, if you are always worrying about what you should or shouldn't eat, if you are always worrying about how other people are perceiving you, if you feel that your self-worth is really tied into your body or appearance, we do that treatment at Balance, and that does fall under an eating disorder. Physically, if you're affected at all, there's a good chance that you have an eating disorder, or all those different ways that Melainie talked about inconsistent nutrition. If your food intake is just erratic, there's a high likelihood that it's going to fall under eating disorder.
Yeah, and you know, certainly disordered eating, right? Right, Danielle, absolutely. And here's a great litmus test question that I use a lot. It's based upon research around, you know, do I have a problem? And again, remember that because of the way the brain is hijacked by the illness, we tend to not realize that this has gotten pretty dangerous. That minimization. The question to ask yourself is, how much of my day do I spend thinking about food, calories, weight, body image, and exercise, if that's part of the equation for you? And when I ask the question, how much of your day, I mean when you're not distracted by work and other busy things or school or whatever it might be. Like if you had a whole weekend where you were forced to just do not much and not be distracted, terrifying for some, right, of those that may be joining us, how much of your day and thoughts would be around food, calories, body image, weight, and exercise? And you may want to check in with yourself, you know, and I'll ask, you know, for people, I can't see you, but I'm just putting up my hand to encourage you to take a minute and think about that. But if you're thinking, okay, maybe 50% of the time, guys, that's 50% of your bandwidth is taken up with that. And what that can sound like is this: as you're listening to Danielle and I today, or maybe you're talking to your kids, or maybe you're talking to your mum or your lover, or your husband or wife, in the background there's a tape that is playing that is, okay, so after dinner, if I can get out for a run, or okay, so I had that for lunch, so that means for dinner tonight I can't. And that is going on as you're listening or having a conversation. That means that this has taken over a little bit more than just I'm trying to be healthy. And actually, for those viewers who are joining us tonight, we know from the research that for our clients with bulimia and binge eating, it can be as much as 80% of the day. For anorexia, it can actually be over 100% of the day. And you may ask, how is that possible? There's only 24 hours in the day. It's because you start to dream about food. Mm-hmm. So, and in case you're wondering, well, someone who doesn't have an eating disorder or disordered eating and probably is male, though I'm not sure that counts in this current society. So someone who's never had an eating disorder, how much of their day do they think they spend thinking about food and calories and all that stuff? 15%. 15%. And our goal with our clients is to get you back from 100+% back down to, you know, into the low 30s, the 20s, somewhere there, and therefore allow so much more of that bandwidth to be spent thinking about more important things than food, calories, and weight. So I hope that helps with some of those signs and symptoms. Think about, how much am I thinking about food? Carmen, thanks for the comment that you totally related to the description about expectations in the future and the mismatch with the lifelong struggle. Marina says, thank you for the session. And Dee, this is from Marina, who's from the dance world, who says, I come from the dance world and have struggled with disordered eating, obsessive thinking, and body dysmorphia. I stepped away from the dance world after teaching for a number of years and noticing I was perpetuating body negativity to students. Unfortunately, it's a really risky area, actually, Marina. Now, a number of years later, I feel I've overcome a lot of my behaviors and mindsets, but still have lingering body dysmorphia and some subtle way that I feel out of control of my eating. Would I still be a candidate for counseling on the subject of eating disorders? I'm seeking a balanced relationship with food and my body. Marina, absolutely, absolutely. First, well done on all the work that you've already done in reducing a lot of those symptoms and behaviors. And it sounds like there's still a little bit more that you want to do to get to the finish line of maybe leaving this completely behind. And we absolutely, for example, we have a body image group 1 night a week, or one-on-one counseling, one-on-one nutrition, just to kind of help you kind of, you know, tweak and get to that place of food neutrality, body neutrality. And it sounds as though you are close, and some extra support might be really helpful. The next question, Danielle, is from Carmen. Does binge eating disorder have the same impact on the heart? Yes, it does, Carmen, because most of our clients with binge eating disorder often have a pattern of restriction and then overeating. And so it's a double whammy, because we go from a place of starvation, and then we go to a place of a flooding of the body with a large quantity of food that the body then has enormous problems digesting properly, and there are GI issues, and that's a lot of pressure on the heart. So although we may see some weakening of the heart because of inconsistent eating, and also what I'd like to say, Carmen, is that so many of our binge eating disorder clients, if they have gone through weight changes and their weight has increased over time, which is a common pattern we see, if that's been the case, they often tell us that they've also done a lot of yo-yo dieting, which is going on a diet, losing weight, regaining. And actually that mechanism of yo-yo dieting has significant impact on the heart and all of the organs, because it's brutal for the body to be going through those kind of significant weight shifts. So the next time someone tells you you should lose 50 pounds or 100 pounds, or, you know, lose 30 pounds in 1 month, or any of those sorts of things, do not do them. They are very, very dangerous. And the heart is something, an organ that we must protect. Jennifer says, what are some ways one can get themselves over that place of being stuck with numbers before they go to treatment? Here's the thing, Jennifer. The getting stuck with the numbers is actually a side effect of malnutrition of the brain. So the more obsessive the thinking is, the by proxy we know that the brain is more and more malnourished. So unfortunately, the only way to get out of that place with the numbers is through consistent nutrition, and if there's been weight loss, actually weight regain, weight restoration, which I know is scary, but the beauty of that and the treatment is that over time you will free up and turn down the volume on all of that, those calculations that go on.
Yeah. And there's two things that we teach in treatment. Emotional regulation is for when you're feeling overwhelmed by your emotions. And then for some of our clients, they actually need to deregulate their emotions a little bit. So they're a little too tightly in control of their emotions. So we do both of those kind of approaches in our treatment, of either regulating through those overwhelming emotions or deregulating, allow some of those emotions to come up. But you need to be nourished to do either one of those skills. So if you're not getting that consistent nutrition, your nervous system literally cannot get through those difficult emotions. So in treatment, and we definitely highlight the importance of the emotional processing while you're doing the nutrition counseling and getting some concrete skills. So when all three of those things start to come together, that's when we really get to start seeing some changes. And also based on what Marina was sharing, I think it's a good time to kind of bring up the iceberg analogy, which you hear a lot in eating disorder treatment. And the vision is that if you're looking at the sea and you see parts of the ice kind of popping up, those are a lot of the behaviors that you'll see of an eating disorder. And when you start treatment and you start working on the behaviors, we're really starting to slash down those different icicles. But there is still a lot of emotional processing work and finding out what those barriers are to not engaging in that consistent eating. that are under the iceberg and really need to be worked through. In terms of body image, we don't expect, just when you start treatment, you're going to go from hating your body to loving your body. We want to challenge that black and white thinking in all areas. And it's not going to be sustainable if it were to happen that quickly. Would we be just as concerned if we saw that? So we work towards body tolerance and body curiosity and different ways to kind of think and feel about our body before we move closer towards body acceptance.
Absolutely. And we've got some other great questions here, but I'm going to save some so we can go through a few more of the questions we've got laid out here, because they may answer some of these. But love the questions, guys. Keep them coming in.
Great.
Carmen, your question was around that litmus test question, like how much of your day do you spend thinking about food and calories? What's the goal? Well, for people who've never had an eating disorder, the research suggests it's around 15% of the day. I tell my clients that, if you've had an eating disorder, it might be unrealistic to get us back to 15%. Though myself having had a lived experience with an eating disorder, I could say that, yeah, for me, unfortunately, at full recovery, I know that my relationship with food is such that I'm hungry. Oh gosh, I've got to find something to eat. It's fallen into that realm. But if we can get you back into the 20s, 20% or 25%, even 30%, think of the bandwidth that you are getting back for yourself to focus on other more important things, your kids, your relationships, your friends, your interests, your work, whatever it may be. Getting vaccinated
and a relief
and traveling.
Because
sorry, go ahead, Danielle.
Those thoughts are exhausting too. So
yes.
But then also just the relief, to not be stuck in that cyclical thinking.
Exactly. So Danielle, we were just talking about, I think we were going to then go down to, do you struggle with ambivalence?
Yeah, so we think that's an important word for everyone to know, whether you're, relate to the questions that we have here. Is this really serious? Do I really warrant help? Am I worthy of help? You might be struggling with ambivalence. So it's really when you're feeling completely torn in two different directions. I want to recover. I don't want to give this up. You might have a couple good days, then you find yourself slipping back into behaviors. You're just really going back and forth. One thing I wanted to highlight tonight is, I hope you feel informed with information after this webinar, but still when you're going into that moment, when you're going to start treatment and you're going to start recovery, there's still a leap of faith. There's still a little bit of an unknown, and kind of my tip for tonight is to ask yourself, how can I get in more of a place of trusting my providers, or, if I do an assessment, or if my therapist has told me I'd really benefit from a higher level of care, how can I work with my ambivalence to trust my providers? Because I think when you're really actively struggling with a disorder, it's hard to have that perspective. Everything becomes so kind of narrow focused. You need to trust the feedback that you're getting from others, and allow that feedback in about how others are experiencing you, what they're noticing. Maybe they've experienced a change, in your relationship, because as Melainie said, when it hijacks the brain, it really does take over and starts to affect your identity and even parts of your personality. And know that change is supposed to feel uncomfortable. So if you are feeling nervous about it, you really don't like how it feels even picking up the phone to talk to us, hey, at least that means that you're getting closer to making a change, because unfortunately change does not feel comfortable. So just remind yourself of that.
Though you can feel proud of it as you're going through it, even as it's like, okay, it feels uncomfortable. That means that, something's happening. Okay,
right.
Let's lean in, however you need to frame it so that you can lean in. Because unfortunately, it's really, really hard, if not impossible, to recover on your own, because you lose your ability to be objective with this illness, because it takes over the thought processes in the brain. So, one day you're on track, the next day you're not, and you're doing that every day, and next thing you know, 10 years have gone by and you've made no progress, and you've eroded a lot of your sense of trust in yourself, and certainly confidence, and relationships start to deteriorate, etc., etc. So It's a pretty big one there, guys, that you know, leaning in and getting, trusting providers, leaning in, get help, get treatment. Because, you know, treatment is available, good treatment is available, and it will make all the difference.
So here's just kind of some basic information about the 5 levels of care that we're going to highlight. In the slide after this, we'll go through just an assessment process and what the steps would look like. So it can be a little anxiety provoking taking the step and not knowing what level of care is going to be recommended, but that is part of the process. But we'll try to inform you at least what could be recommended. So inpatient level of care would be a hospital-based program, and that would be if your admissions therapist felt like you would really benefit from some consistent medical support, some consistent psychiatric support. If there may be some meds that you're going to be trying for the first time, or your labs just need to be more consistently viewed. When you're in a hospital setting, you have more access to a medical doctor and a psychiatrist. So that's, you know, a possibility based on the questions that we ask. If you think that's going to help you be successful in these other levels of care, and we're concerned about either medically, psychiatrically, or what's happening with your medication, could be recommended inpatient. One step down from there would be a residential treatment. I do like to tell people that high majority of residentials across the country are very nice, lovely residential homes with a couple beds in each room, and treatment centers really do their best job at making it feel welcoming, and you know, treatment has really advanced in that way that it, you know, doesn't have to feel like you're in a hospital when you're going through this. And the benefit of residential is it provides 24/7 both behavioral and emotional support. So if you know, did some programming, or you're working with your therapist, but really at the end of the day, or, you know, in the next day, you can't stay on track with your treatment plan, residential could be really helpful at that point, because even if you're not in a group with a therapist, all the staff are going to be trained on how to get you through those difficult times throughout the whole day. And if you've, you know, tried different avenues and you just really can't get a break from your behaviors, we do see a pretty rapid decrease in behaviors in residential, whether it's accountability of watching the bathroom, someone helping you prepare your foods, someone being aware if you're going to get out of your bed at night, you know, the range of different behaviors that we could see that are really hard to deal with on your own. You can get that support in residential care. Day program is a step down from that, and that's our highest level of care that we have at Balance. So it's a 6 to 8 hour day. It could be anywhere from 5 to 7 days a week, depending on level of need and the clinical assessment. You're going to be experiencing therapeutic groups, experiential groups, supported meals. At Balance, we're really happy to say that our meals are either led by a dietitian or a recovery coach that works so closely with the dietitians. So people are really connected to what your meal plan looks like and help you know that you made your meal plan if you're working on portioning or helping you with that. We do individual nutrition counseling, individual case management, and we encourage all of our clients to engage in individual therapy, and family therapy often is helpful in the process as well. From there, do you want to say something about day program?
No, go ahead, Dee. Yep.
Okay. And then we have an evening program. It's 3 hours. At Balance, we have it 3 nights a week. But again, that can be anywhere from 3 to 5 days, depending on the level of struggle and need. It's going to be similar to the day program, but it's shortened. And we feel in our assessment that the client has some skills to really help them through their day-to-day. So a lot of clients in our intensive outpatient 3 hour program might still be maintaining school or work. And we're kind of assessing them at a level where we feel like recovery is going to be, you know, possible for them while they're maintaining those responsibilities. And we always just want to be honest with our clients after the assessment. We want to set you up for success. I know the recommendations can kind of take a lot of clients back, as Melainie said, because it's hard to be in that objective place for what's really going on for yourself. We want to make sure that we're providing the adequate amount of hours that are going to help you really challenge your struggles. We also have outpatient groups and individual support. That would be, you know, a treatment plan might be going to a group once a week, seeing your therapist once a week, and working with a registered dietitian once a week. Some clients start with that, some clients end with that. Everyone's recovery path does look a little different, but you just want to make sure you have the adequate support to help you.
Absolutely. Danielle, there's a couple of great questions. I was just reading through them as you were taking us through the levels of care. And this one I think is particularly prudent maybe to cover now while we're looking at levels of care. The question comes from Zoom Pro, and they ask, are there statistics showing successful long-term recovery after going to treatment? My thought process around going to treatment is that it most likely won't work. And I'd have to go back continually, as I've seen with other women I've met in support groups. I see this as something I'll struggle with even as I have a family and children of my own, which is scary. And I think it's a great question. And many of our clients, in fact, I would say most come in saying, I'm going to try this, but I'm pretty sure it won't work for me. I think it's a common theme, and we actually think that sense of it won't work for me is part of how the brain gets hijacked into distorted thinking. Is what we think is one of these traits that we see. The reality, though, if you look at the data, is that actually good long-term care does have very, very good success rates. Here's where we see where people do come unstuck, though, and end up going back and back and back into treatment. Perhaps first and foremost, I think the biggest one is, number one, not getting the right level of care and the right amount of support at the get-go. So maybe just working with a therapist, or maybe one group, one night a week, when in fact you need residential to build a foundation that you can then step back down to less support and be successful in continuing on those behaviors. So that's really the litmus test with which level of care. I know that can be really scary, this slide, but it's not coming from a punitive place. It's coming from a place of how long have you had the illness for, and how severe are the daily symptoms, and how much obsessionality is going on. And then based upon that, if you were to join a program for 3 hours, 3 nights a week, would that be enough to really reduce and get rid of those behaviors over time? And if you're finding that it's not, like you're somewhat reducing symptoms, but not really, then that just tells us not that you're not trying hard enough. We know that our clients work so hard, but rather you need more support in order to be able to reduce those symptoms, get those coping skills built up, build up those muscles around distress tolerance and boundaries. And when my boss yells at me, I don't then go and binge or then restrict or whatnot. And so that's really, getting the right level of care and being in good treatment with people who know what they're doing is so crucial. And then the second piece to that is not dropping out of treatment too early. And we see that so many times, and I can't tell you guys how heartbreaking it is, because we know that client, should they come back to recovery, it's going to be a good way. And so we see people who may be from the substance use industry, where it's, I'm going to do 30 days of rehab and get sober. Well, that's just the start point, and eating disorders don't work that way. Remember, we're talking about renourishing the brain, and we know that takes an extended period of time. So the thought processes can start to normalize your executive functioning, which is your ability to reason and think through things and make a decision based upon cause and effect. That part of the brain is actually offline for a lot of your eating disorder. So you're even if you want to, it's really hard to make good decisions. And that lack of objectivity that we talked about. So not getting in the right level of care at the get-go, and not dropping out too soon, and then not having stepped down. And we've learned a lot in our field over the years, because what we used to do is send clients to residential or inpatient, and then they just come back to once a week with their therapist and once a week with their nutritionist. And guess what happened? in the first year, which is the crucial first year of recovery, they would destabilize and they'd end up having to go back to res. But it's a no-brainer now, and that's why we have all these levels of care that Danielle's walked you through, because you need to kind of build up strength at each level as you gain more freedom or independence or more immersion back into your real life and stresses that go with that to be able to sustain your recovery through all of those levels. So that's what I would say. I know that sounds really scary. There's great statistics we have now. Balance has some really good statistics over the first 3 months with us, and then follow-up statistics at 6 and 12 months, etc. And I run an alumni group of clients that have been with us, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, who are always available to talk actually to anyone who's interested about this process. So I just want to say, I know it's scary. I know it feels like it won't work for you. But the only other option is not doing treatment. And we know that will probably guarantee that recovery won't be a part of the future, because it's really hard to do this completely on your own. So to consider those things. Another question, Dee, if it's all right. This client says, I usually emotionally eat and binge eat on a daily basis, but I would skip meals the next day to catch up. Is that normal? Yes, that is the pattern that we see with binge eating disorder. So, so if you're asking, is that normal eating? That's not normal eating. Normal eating is usually a pattern of consistent eating, consistent meals, I should say, throughout the day. And for most people, that's a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner. And for some other people, there might need to be a couple of snacks in there because to keep blood sugars even. I hope that's helpful. Another point here is this is from Hope, I'm currently in a drug treatment center. My eating disorder has come back after stopping drugs. Hope, that is so common. About 50 to 60% of people with eating disorders have co-occurring substance use because of the way the brain is wired with this vulnerability. So it's very common. I'm assuming the drug treatment center are unsure about how to deal with that ED, / don't do anything about it. In an eating disorder treatment center, how do you go about meals? Do the clients have to eat a certain amount of their food? So 2 things I'd like to say here about this, Hope. One is, unfortunately, right now, a lot of treatment for drug use and eating disorders are very siloed. And they shouldn't be, because I just mentioned there's a 60% overlap, that they are. And it's very common that if you treat one, the other one pops up. So I just want to normalize that for you. There's nothing wrong with you. You haven't done it wrong, that this is happening. And now the next step would be protect your sobriety and get good eating disorder treatment. And what that means, what do? We have meals. We sit down at a table together and we eat our meals, or we used to. Now it's on Zoom. And clients have a meal plan. Our goal is to get you towards consistent, adequate nutrition on a daily basis. And that is how we're going to be able to re-nourish the brain and get the brain back online and re-nourish the body. So that's what a meal plan is for. And so we do therefore make recommendations of how much our clients may need to eat depending upon where they are, with their weight cycling or restriction or overeating, etc. But we certainly don't put people on diets. I just want to emphasize that as well.
It's such a mission of ours at Balance to do so much education. We're doing a lot of education. The medical professionals, all different types of doctors that we always highlight don't have nutrition counseling training, and they should not really be telling you what or what not to eat. And also with sober livings, and you can't assume that substance abuse therapists are familiar with eating disorders because typically get the most training experience in the field. So we've seen a lot of success of clients working with us and also working with the substance abuse specialists and really collaborating and looking at both issues, because they usually are intertwined, as Melainie said.
Absolutely. And one last question here. We talk about what happens when the brain is undernourished, but what happens when the brain gets too much nourishment from binging? You may have heard of, a food coma, or people feeling very foggy, falling asleep after binging. So that's a repercussion of an overdose of food. So therefore, the body is trying to process that food and absorb it into the cells, which is what it's supposed to do. And because of that, usually a high percentage of carbohydrate makes up a binge. And the reason for that is because when carbohydrates are broken down and absorbed, there's actually an uptick in serotonin in the brain. So actually, when we're binging, we're medically and chemically, we're chemically modifying our mood in a way to feel better, because serotonin is related to reducing anxiety. So it is functioning in a binge capacity. It's functioning in the same way that one may use substances to actually alter your current state. So that's what happens when you are binging, as opposed to the restriction that leads to undernourishment and actually a shrinkage of the brain over time is what we've seen from tests. All right, shall we go on there, and we'll come back to some more questions in a moment.
So here's just some basic steps if you are thinking about getting help. I think it's helpful to know what you might be walking into. It all starts with a call to a provider. We'll be sharing our number at the end of this webinar. We also have some online options where you can just go online and book a free 20-minute consultative call for a time that's good for you. And we have call times all throughout the day. What we would do from that call is set you up with an admissions therapist. So some master's level therapist that's familiar with eating disorders and can recommend treatment for you. We do a 90-minute assessment, getting background about how the eating disorder is affecting you, the type of thoughts that you've had, any medical complications, anything that your body has been through physically or emotionally. At Balance, we're a team of therapists or dietitians, so we will ask you to make an appointment with your PCP, or we'll help you make an initial appointment with an eating disorder specialist, PCP. Any clients we do see take those recommendations to work with a doctor that actually gets it, are really reflecting back to us how different it feels, and how they really have not been noticed in the proper way under their past medical care. So it can really make such a difference, and we're always happy to provide those referrals. We meet as a team, as a Balance team. We put our heads together to come up with the best Balance recommendation for you. And I think it is helpful, that you meet with your admissions therapist, but you will have multiple kind of perspectives and eyes kind of looking at that and really giving the feedback for what's going to be best for you. We do 2 to 3 follow-ups after your intake assessment. We want to make sure that you understand your diagnosis, understand the treatment plan, understand what it will take to challenge behaviors, recognize when that ambivalence is coming up, what it's really connected to. We know work and school and time and finances are all, difficult issues that come up when putting this together. So we want to support you throughout the whole way. We're not just going to, give a recommendation and walk away. If you have some willingness, we want to meet you with that and help you get connected and get on this path. We also offer complimentary family or loved one sessions if you are telling your loved one for the first time that you have an eating disorder, or you're struggling. It is such an internal disorder that unless you tell people the types of thoughts you're having or how frequently you're having them, a lot of people in your life really just won't know that you're struggling, suffering, hurting, having a really hard time. So like I said, if you do an assessment, we do those complimentary sessions to help you voice what you're going through. And also loved ones can actually help you stay accountable to taking the steps that you need to. So, making sure that you don't just make the appointment with the doctor, that you do also get to that appointment and you get to your follow-ups with Balance.
Absolutely. Danielle, a couple of questions then related to assessment. I'm sorry, I'm just scanning here to make sure I get to the right one. Oh, yes, the question is, do you recommend bringing in doctors? This is from Amanda. Do you recommend bringing in doctors such as gastroenterologists and primary care doctors when beginning treatment? Absolutely, Amanda, and that's what Danielle was going over there, that we definitely want to make sure that everything's safe for you. So we involve medical doctors, and we have a whole list of lab work that we want them to do, so that we can make sure that, you know, your heart's okay and organs are working, etc. And often we do use GI or gastroenterologist specialists, because so many of our clients have stomach issues, intestinal issues, bowel movement issues. That's a part and parcel, unfortunately, of the illness as well. So a big yes to that. And then another question here was around something around picky eating. So this is from Cassie. Cassie says, I think I have a unique case. My disorder is extreme pickiness due to not liking most foods. It has nothing to do with wanting to be skinny or body image. I just don't like food. This has been my way for my whole life. I'm 35, and that has led me to be hospitalized almost 2 years ago with scurvy. Scurvy is a lack of vitamin C, guys. We used to see it on, when we had, shipping and sailboat shipping. So, when America was first colonized, scurvy was very common then because of the lack of citrus fruits such as oranges, etc. that provides vitamin C. Anyway, I lost the use of both of my legs and spent 2 months in the hospital, and then had to go to rehab to learn how to walk again. Wow. I've changed my life to be more healthy, but I could do more, and that's why I need help. Absolutely. Cassie, you may not know this, but this eating disorder is called ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. A hallmark feature of it is that it's not about being skinny, and it's not about body image, which is unique, because all of the other eating disorders do have those components. So it can sound like it's not an eating disorder, but often it is AKA pickiness, extreme pickiness that leads to major medical complications, which I'm so sorry to hear you've struggled with. We actually have seen a really big uptick in ARFID cases, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder cases, over the last year with COVID, for whatever reason. And my team is very specialized in working with this and helping people slowly but surely increase the variety of food that they're eating, and also to do a workup with a speech pathologist around textural issues. We have many people who struggle with this eating disorder have sensory issues as well. So we want to get all of those things checked out for you, especially because you had such severe consequences. I'm really sorry to hear that. Okay, and maybe we'll go on to the next slide, Danielle, and we can take another question or two at that point.
Yeah, I did want to include this tonight because I think some of the nerves around treatment are connected to ambivalence, or not feeling sick enough, or not being able to figure out how to prioritize your needs, because your eating disorder is going to convince you that your needs are not that important. So these are just some myths that we want to break, and some fact checks that we want to do for tonight. So many people with eating disorders look healthy, but may be extremely ill. So that's a lot of psychoeducation that I feel that I really do all year round. There is a stigma and sometimes a perception that you have to be underweight to warrant treatment, and that it's so not the case. And, having worked in the field, there's many clients that do not meet that image and have very severe eating disorders that really affect their life and their well-being and their physical. So please know that that is not a requirement that is needed to warrant treatment. Truth number 2, families are not to blame and can be the clients and providers' best allies in treatment. And a lot of times we do have family members join these webinars to learn more, and families are also afraid about participating in treatment because they feel that they're going to be blamed. And we know in the kind of psychoeducation that we do that there's usually 3 or 4 factors really colliding on each other that make the eating disorder thrive and make it difficult to deal with. So it's never one thing. I think clients, as much as family, would like to be able to point the finger to just one thing, but it's not possible. There's so many factors that go into play for it. An eating disorder diagnosis is a health crisis that disrupts personal and family functioning. Eating disorders are not choices, but serious biologically influenced illnesses. We do say that a lot and have to remind clients a lot. It's not your fault where you're struggling. And we just want to help you be able to recognize and say what's going on so you can get the proper help. Eating disorders affect people of all genders, all ages, all races and ethnicities, all body shapes and sizes, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status. Has nothing to do with where you came from. It's what you're facing in the moment. Eating disorders carry an increased risk for both suicide and medical complications. Genes and environment play important roles in the development of eating disorder, but genes alone do not predict who will develop eating disorders. And last, full recovery from an eating disorder is possible. Early detection and intervention are important, and good treatment is essential. This is our balanced space that we hope to return to sooner than later. We're in New York City. We are all virtual right now. We have our outpatient groups, we have one-to-one support, we have our day treatment, as I discussed. Could be anywhere from 5 to 6 days based on clinical need. We have our evening program 3 nights a week, and we have Saturday program from 8:30 to 1:30. Because again, we really try to challenge any of that black and white thinking or functioning. We don't want you to do just be better for a couple days. We really want to make this sustainable for you so that what you're practicing at Balance, you're also practicing outside of treatment hours at home in life. And this is our very last slide. I'll just leave it up while we go through the rest of our questions. We are available. We have a full admission staff to talk to you if you're questioning whether you have an eating disorder or you're questioning how to get help in place. We are trained and we're here to help you. That's our main job and focus. So feel free to book a call with us or just call our main line. We'd be happy to talk to you.
Terrific, Danielle. Thank you so much. I'm just answering some questions here. So for all of you who submitted some questions, thank you so much. I'm trying to answer away here. And let me just check our last couple of questions here. Alyssa says, thank you so much. Some other questions. What are some of the root causes of eating disorders? That's a big one. And the answer is common. We think the current thinking is there's a genetic predisposition. It's called the loaded gun theory, which I hate the name of that, but that's what it's called, where genetics loads the gun and then the environment pulls the trigger. And the environment can be anything from trauma to, families, to culture, of course, a thin ideal in that culture. Social media certainly ups the ante around this. Being bullied, for example, having some kind of abuse, whether it be physical abuse or emotional abuse in the home, or sexual abuse, unfortunately, is very common. So some kind of very, very significant trigger that then leads someone to start to become very, very obsessive around food as a manifestation of anxiety. It's not really about the food and the weight, though that is the manifestation of the illness. So that's just a broad strokes, but I hope that's helpful. And Carmen, you're most welcome. I know that we're at 6:30 on the dot, Danielle, so we're going to be finishing up now. We want to thank you so much for all your wonderful questions and for joining us tonight as we walked you through some of the most common questions that we hear, and certainly Danielle and her team in the admissions admissions department at Balance. And you know, for those of you who are wondering, gosh, I think I might have a problem, do take us up on our free 20-minute discovery call, and we can also point you in the direction of a lot of different resources out in the community. Our goal, of course, is, you know, if we can treat you and help you at Balance, we'd love to do that. But we certainly are very desiring in getting people connected with the right resources. And that may be, you know, at some other location other than Balance. So, you know, please do give us a call. And I hope that we can be of help to you. And I hope you found tonight to be helpful as well. Thank you so much. And Danielle, thank you so much. Great job on the presentation.
Thank you.